I can remember being this way with Rachel, with my wife, where I was just like, she can do no wrong. She's perfect. She's the most beautiful person I've ever met. Like, all of these things. And then eventually you see each other for what you really are. And I think that real love comes when you see the person for their faults and you choose to love them anyway. You're listening to Barbell Logic, brought to you by Barbell Logic Online Coaching, where each week we take a systematic walk through strength training and the refining power of voluntary hardship.
Welcome to the Barbell Logic Podcast. I am Scott Hambrick. Matt Reynolds is drinking coffee over there, and David Puder just flashed those blue eyes at me. And we're going to do part 2 of dating red flags and green flags, by the way, with Diamond David Puder. So excited. I'm sorry to you guys, the listeners, that it's taken so long for us to get this thing out. The old show was, I don't know, probably almost 3 months ago now. But it takes a little while for us to all get in the same virtual room to do this.
I feel like this is a UFC grudge match, and I'm like the referee. You know, our normal podcast is I'm like the play-by-play guy, and Scott's the color man. And here I feel like every time we do a Puder podcast, I'm like, I'm just going to stay in the background. I'm going to let you guys hash it out. And every once in a while, I'm going to step in and separate you guys and be like, okay, here we go. So Scott's the aggressor. Puder's he's like a Hoist Gracie.
I like Royce Gracie better. I like that idea.
Okay.
All right, let's do it. Where are we starting?
Yeah, so we did 10 red flags on the last show, and we got through 3 of the green lights, where Dr. Puder said, if you see these things, you might have a good life mate in front of you, possibly. So I think you had, maybe like 10 more. I think you had 13 total.
Yeah, so there's 22. I sent you guys the email of the PDF.
Okay.
And you guys can send that PDF out to your listeners or post that somewhere. But, you know, the idea behind this is, I think a lot of times when you start dating someone, you're kind of blinded by, you know, hormones and pheromones. And so it's kind of a checklist. Like if you go through this list and, you know, you have 10 of these that are positive for the person, you know, that's where it's like you should consider discussing the relationship with a therapist or with your pastor or with some of your friends, and see if you can get some sort of insight into what you're missing. Because I think a lot of times we're blind to what we don't know, right?
I've coined a word for this blindness. It's a state of being dickmatized.
Dickmatized?
Yeah. You're like, oh man, she's so great. I'm like, dude, you're dickmatized because I've seen her. She's awful. I saw her punch a kid at the grocery store, and her
What
car's.
does that word mean?
It means you're like, it's like being hypnotized by your genitals.
Oh, okay, I get it. Okay.
That's colorful.
That's
Man, it's just a tough room. You guys are just, Jesus Christ.
Well, I was like, was it D-I-C-T or did he literally mean D-I-C-K? And he was like, he literally meant
Yeah, you're dickmatized.
dickmatized. Okay. All right. Yeah.
Well, I think honestly, there's this thing where it makes sense that we sort of lose some, you know, rationality in love, right? And you see only the positive, only the good at first. That's like a phase. And I think some people get addicted to that phase, you know, where like, then when they get out of that phase, they're like, oh, I guess I'm out of the relationship now.
Yeah.
You know,
What percentage of people do you think that seems so normal to me that you go through the puppy love or infatuation stage of a relationship before you move into I can remember being this way with Rachel, with my wife, where I was just like, she can do no wrong. She's perfect. She's the most beautiful person I've ever met. Like, all of these things. And then eventually you see each other for what you really are. And I think, you're the psychiatrist, but I think that real love comes when you see the person for their faults and you choose to love them anyway. How, like in your experience, do the vast majority of people who are in a relationship that lasts go through that typical sort of infatuation period, you know, puppy love period, whatever you want to call it, and there's a little bit of this, okay, actually you're not perfect, but I'm choosing to love you anyway for the rest of my life? Is that pretty common, or is it not so common?
I mean, I would love to say that that's what happens. And I think those are the phases that people go through, but people get stuck somewhere in phase 2 where then they see the person and the person has their bad side and they've said some nasty things to them and they never forgive, and they're never able to get past that. And then 20 years later, they have some sort of psychosomatic illness where they have body pain or they have dizziness or psychogenic seizures or chronic migraines. And that anger that they have towards their partner has grown into malice, and they're not willing to divorce or get rid of the relationship. But they're staying in the relationship and they're just they have this resentment, which is why I think true forgiveness, and forgiveness is not what most people think it is. I think it's it's saying that it was wrong, it was feeling the wrong, but it's deciding that they're going to let it go, maybe to their higher power, maybe to the universe, but to sort of move past that resentment and then to see the person for who they are. And then it's kind of like you at first are only seeing a reflection of yourself, the best things that you visualize, your ideal, right? That's not a real person. That's not who they are. And if you only can see that and you can't move past into okay, this is who they are. This is their personality. This is their shortcomings. This is what they're like when they're hungry, starving, beat up, stressed out. This is what they're like when they're on their A game, because we all have those darker sides of ourselves. And then moving into a place of acceptance, I think that's where love, that's like a deeper love, and that's probably, if you can have grace for that person and their mistakes and their shortcomings and still embrace them and love them and choose to forgive when they sort of bristle against you. I think that's the beautiful stuff that leads to thriving in communities,
Yes, and I think that if you come from a family of origin where there have been people that have done that, your grandparents, especially your own parents, you can see that these older people love each other and how they do that, and it becomes clear to you that they're not in that euphoric stage 1, and so you kind of know what's coming. You kind of see it, but I think a lot of people haven't actually seen these functioning relationships. Stage 1 hits them, and they think, "Oh, this is what it's like forever," and then it goes away, and they think they don't love them anymore. I don't
right.
know.
And that's in the media too. I mean, it's so often in movies that this stage 1 is kind of like where the relationship ends, this infatuation, this very rarely do you see people actually working through the conflicts and coming out the other side.
Yeah, we've been really careful with our daughters to not get into the happily ever after princess. That's not life, We've been honest enough with them. We're careful and we protect them, but we're honest with them about hey, happily ever after. So I'll play a semantics game where we don't put much stock in the word happy.
Right.
So, and it could just be semantics, but let me be clear. I think happiness is fleeting. Happiness is it's about today, right? And we try to use the word joy as being more long lasting. And again, you could just play a semantics game, but if one of my daughter, one of my daughters or my wife gets cancer, I'm not happy today, right? But I can still have joy in our relationship and our life and those sort of things. And so for us, and well, let me say for me, my parents are baby boomers, and again, there are always outliers, but my experience with baby boomers have been that they sort of protect and hide the dirty things, hey, there are things that have happened in our life that we don't want to talk about, we don't want to address. And so I was raised in a background that was hey, everything's fine. Everything's always fine, right? And my mom and dad actually had a really, really good marriage relationship, and they were great parents and whatnot. But we've been a little more open with our kids about happily ever after is a fairy tale. It's not real. And that you're going to have to work through the hard times. There are valleys just as there are peaks. And if we really love each other, then we're in it no matter what. In the middle of the valley, in the middle of the fire, in the worst of the worst, through the deepest possible pain, our joy is enough. When the happiness is not there, the joy still can be. And so for us, that's a big part of it. Man, I hope it doesn't screw my kids up, but I choose to teach it that way rather than we're going to hold everything back and not be honest about anything with our kids.
So there's going to be
I don't want them to expect that it's perfect.
There's going to be a part 3 and 4 of this, I can tell. Yeah, the Greeks have a word for it that they don't like the happiness thing either. They call it eudaimonia. Where it's like this deep sort of contentment, this closeness to that which is good and the good life. It's probably your joy, Matt.
Yeah.
I like the word joy because I think you can have joy in suffering. I mean, that's a little bit counterintuitive, but think about it with a good workout. You can have joy when you're squatting heavy. There can be meaning that transcends the realities of the day to day, and I think that's the goal of the mature person. That's my goal, is to have the joy at all times. To not neglect the deeper meaning and the values, right, that I hold, and to live those out. And you can see relationships that have joy. You can see relationships that don't have joy. I think I was raised in a family where there was not a lot of joy. There was a lot of suffering, and the suffering was very visible. And so I was very hesitant to get married, very anxious to get married, and had to work through that.
Yeah.
So I mean, how many couples do you know well where you can say they have a lot of joy?
Few.
2.
A couple, right?
Right.
Oh man. Okay. So shall we start the list?
Let's do it.
Okay. Does this person have emotional energy tied to a past relationship?
These are red flags, right?
These are the red flags, yeah.
These are red flags. Okay, got it.
So the idea there is like how much of their day is spent either hating, or still in love with this past person. You don't want to be dating someone who spends 25% of their emotional energy thinking with anger about this past person.
Yep. Or pining.
Right. Yeah. Or pining, which is even worse probably, but where forgiveness is often not for the person who committed the egregious error, but it's the person that's forgiving is who the forgiveness is often for most often, right? Like you said a minute ago, it's that I'm going to choose to forgive this person for me, not for them. I'm going to choose to let it go so that I can heal.
100%.
Yeah.
100%. Yeah. Forgiveness it's not reconciliation. So forgiveness is not going to the person, having them apologize and saying, I forgive you. That's reconciliation. Forgiveness, you don't even have to talk to the person. You just decide in your mind that you don't want to spend any of your emotional energy thinking about the person. And so you go down this process of forgiveness. I did a whole episode on the science of forgiveness if anyone's skeptical. And even just from the episode, I've gotten hundreds of messages from people saying it's helped me forgive. I don't want to stay angry. I don't want to spend emotional energy on someone, and continue to drink their poison, know?
Right.
By the way, that's the psychiatry and psychotherapy podcast, right? Is your podcast?
Yep. That's it.
So number 11 here, you say, does the person still have emotional energy tied to a past relationship? And we will put this PDF, by the way, in the show notes. Let me ask this, and I think it's true. When you say relationship, you don't necessarily mean their old boyfriend. It could be daddy stuff.
Yeah, it could be abuse, right?
Right. I mean, it could be like any past relationship. Or when you wrote this, did you mean specifically romantic involvements?
I was thinking romantic involvements, but I think I think it would also apply to, how much energy are they spending on past relationships, period.
Enmeshed family system.
As kind of a sign of like, what is a healthy person? I think a person in a very healthy place doesn't spend a lot of emotional energy on past relationships in a negative way, right? So they're not like 50% of their emotional energy is spent towards thinking about their abusive father. I think it's different if they're doing the work, like if they have a plan to overcome it, like they're seeing a therapist, they're working on it, it's still there, but they have a plan,
What if their plan is number 12? This person wants me to be their therapist.
Yeah, that one in particular. If you're an empath, if you have higher empathy, if you've played the therapist in your family system growing up, if mom or dad was an alcoholic or depressed or had some sort of mental illness, and you found yourself as like the peacemaker, right? Then it'll be very common for you to end up in a relationship where you're playing this role, and you really can't be your partner's therapist. You can love them, and that can be of help, but I've seen very loving husbands with very dysfunctional wives that haven't made progress in their dysfunction, because there's something about when you enter into an attachment relationship with someone, an intimate romantic relationship, you just can't play that role in their life to heal them. So it's a red flag.
Yeah.
How often do you think, too, on the other side of the spectrum, that you have people that actually look for people who are damaged and need help, and they have that sort of savior complex? Let me save this person. Let me fix this person. And so they're attracted to the damage.
Yeah, and that's why I was referring to, like, if that's the role that you played in your childhood, you'll probably try to play that role in your current relationship until you get healing. Until you work through that.
And by the way,
told the story on here. Did you play that role? I mean, did you struggle with that? Because I think you've told your story in the past that was sort of who you were in your family, right?
Yeah, that was. I mean, so that's what I found, and especially in my early relationships, in college, in high school, I found that to be true.
Did you try to fix healthy people, or did you seem to seek out and be attracted? I know we're getting personal here.
Okay, here's a good
seek
example.
Out people who were broken?
Here's a good example. I go on a backpacking trip for a week, and I realize I need to break up with this girl, right?
Yep.
And I come back from the backpacking trip, and I break up with her, and she is so emotionally, she breaks down, anger, sadness, and I feel that emotion. And so I decide to stay with her because it kind of pulls me back in. The dysfunction pulls me back in.
I think I need to start a service where people can pay me like $25 and I'll just call their girlfriend and just break up with her. Hey, Steve reached out to me. I know you don't know me, but I want you to know Steve is really thankful for all the time you guys have spent together, but he's determined it's best for him and for you if it ends now. He's already blocked your number. Best of luck to you in all your future relationships. If you ever need me to help you break up with a future boyfriend, you can contact me at thank you. And then I hang up. So if you guys need that, I'm available.
He'll do it for free. He actually won't even charge $25. He'll get a little dopamine hit every time he gets to do it.
And by the way, all of this stuff you're talking about, David, that harkens back to Puder's Law number 4. These are all now officially Puder's Laws. Puder's Law number 4. Am I feeling a pull to rescue them in some way?
Yeah. Oh man. Okay. Does this person have a lot of drama surrounding them? If they have, there's some people that I've found, like, no matter where they are in their life, they're going to have a ton of drama surrounding them. Now, if they're like the CEO of a company, they probably will have a lot of drama surrounding them.
I was going to say, this is like the Matt Reynolds. This is the part where I can't let my wife listen to this. So,
But I would think there's some people that like create conflict and create chaos.
Sure.
Because that's where they enjoy being the center of attention for the sake of being the center of attention. If this is the only red flag on the list, that's one thing. But if all the other ones are red as well, then pay heed to it, right?
Right. Yeah, there's a little bit of just dating people in their 20s. That's that a little bit. So there's a drama gradient for sure.
Oh man.
Here's number 14. I love number 14. Puder's Law number 14. Is this person married, even if they say they're going through a divorce or are separated?
Ooh.
Okay, why do I put this one? I put this one because I've been there with people who are going through divorces or
Who are
separated.
you dating that was married?
Dating?
Yeah, not you personally, right?
Not me personally,
Oh,
man.
okay.
I mean, as like a psychiatrist.
Okay.
I've been there, and I've been on the other side where, like, this girl is like, yeah, he's really great. He's going through a divorce. He's separated, but
They still live in the same house. They're in separate bedrooms, though. But everything's
Sure. And it's just like a matter of like where their emotional energy is. I mean, going through divorce, it's painful, especially if there's a child custody battle. I mean, that's going to be very painful to walk with them in the midst of, and so,
And not to mention that people just lie about that stuff.
that's another thing, right?
Or even best intentions, right? Or even best intentions, right? Like their intention is, we see this all the time.
Yeah.
People have the intention of getting divorced or separated, but and then
they reconcile.
But they've been married, and then they reconcile,
which
as
they should do.
That's right. Good.
And, okay, the other aspect I would say to that is that sometimes people are more duplicitous than they even think that they are in their own brain, right? So when they're with the person they're having this relationship with that's not their current wife, they really feel like they're going to continue to be separated and continue to move away and blah, blah, blah. But when they're with their wife, it's like they kind of fluctuate into this other place of like, well, maybe this could work. Maybe we could get this,
They're great at compartmentalizing, right? They can completely compartmentalize. When I'm in this situation, I'm this, and when I'm in this situation, I am the opposite.
Or they're delusional, which brings us to Puder's Law 20. Does how they present themselves match with reality? If he's like, oh, I'm here to date you. I care about you so much. No, I'm still married, but we're kind of, we're separated, and I'm sleeping on the futon. But how they comport themselves doesn't match with the reality. The person that is married is not available for a new intimate relationship, whether they think they are or not.
Yeah, to number 20, and do they match with reality? I would say there's some people who have a facade, a false persona that they wish that they were or that they project to the world, but it's just completely different than the real person. And if they have this crusty exterior that is so detached from reality, when you start pointing out reality, they will react often with a lot of anger, either isolating or and so this hero complex that they hold in their mind may be how they actually see themselves, and they will protect that at all cost. But the problem is it's really hard to be in relationship with this person because they have a lot of perfectionism, a lot of shoulds around how they idealize themselves, and then they'll demand those things from others, and they will also not receive feedback well when it doesn't match with their image of themselves.
So is that, I guess you wrote that question kind of pointing at a little narcissistic personality disorder, maybe?
Yeah, if there's a great book that goes through the details, it's called, it's Karen Horney, Neurosis and Human Growth. And it talks about this person and how to get this person back out of that. But I don't think you can date them out of that. Like it takes it takes some intensive psychotherapy to move someone out of sort of that idealized sense of self into more reality.
It's good.
Back to Puder's Law 15, the rule of Puder. I don't know. We're gonna hammer this out. It's gonna be good.
The gospel according to Puder.
Does this person have addictions which they have not worked through, resolved, and maybe don't even see as a problem?
Can I say I've met multiple female patients that for months, they don't know that their new relationship person is using opiates, is using cocaine, is using heavy drugs. Like it's completely secret from them.
Hire a detective.
But they start to see like things that don't make sense. Like this person is acting really weird this time, completely different this other time. And then, months into the relationship, they find out this person's using heavily, and it's a huge red flag.
Yeah, now they're emotionally invested, right? So now it's harder to get out of.
And this harkens to Puder's Law 21. When there are discrepancies between how they present themselves in reality, do they react with anger, rage, and attacking? So, the person that's using is going to be erratic in their behavior. The way they present themselves isn't going to comport with reality. A lot of trouble.
So, Puder, I just want to. Obviously, Hambrick's strategy for that is to hire the detective, and we joke about it. Hambrick's 100% serious about it. What would you do if you don't think you should hire a detective, Puder, how do you find out if your loved one is potentially addicted to something?
Let me say this before you go. Now, I want to point out in that episode, which was one about the leg press and the leg drive and the bench press, I actually said that, if you don't know this person, if you're in this metropolitan area, you're both new to the area, you don't have friends in common, you don't know their family, then you might need to hire a detective. So Hambrick believes that if you've known this person a long time, you know their family, you're from the same area, you can rely on your social contacts to help you find these things out. But often people that are sort of displaced or new to an area don't have the social network and the community around them that can help them suss this stuff out. Like there was nobody in Catoosa that so much as smoked a Marlboro Red and you didn't know it. Right, in 1988. And so it wasn't a problem. There was no need for a detective there. If you move to Chicago and you start dating a girl 3 months later, it's going to be tough. So that's my that's my clarification about my stance. Go ahead, David.
What's the practical strategy there, Puder?
There's a couple that come to my mind. I mean, some were just said, like, ideally you have friends, you have family that have met this person, you have some social context, you meet their friends. If this person has no friends that they can introduce to you, no family, they're kind of like this lone person. They've burned a lot of bridges. They may have very sophisticated narratives for why this is the case, but these are red flags. The other thing is going with your gut. I mean, there's something in you that's going to be warning you about the health of this relationship.
Sure.
If you get into it and you hear that they've detoxed multiple times and they're going to AA or NA, how far along in their recovery are they? No one's perfect. People struggle with addictions. It could be food. It could be all sorts of things. It could be buying things. How far along are they into a healthy place? So I think that one of the things that comes to my mind is learning about drugs. Like if you are a naive person who was not, exposed to this, who doesn't have, a family history of drugs, like you have no exposure to people in your life who have used and what that might be like, jumping on, watching some documentaries on methamphetamines, on opiates, on heroin, on these things is very, very important just to learn like what this does to people. Because if you haven't seen it firsthand in your life, like you just have no idea about how these things can really influence someone. And it's like people will sacrifice their children, to drugs. They'll sacrifice the things that are the most dear to them to substances.
16. Is this person critical about almost everyone they meet? Yeah, that's me.
Yeah.
That's Scott's red flag.
Scott, I don't think I've experienced you critical towards me.
No, I love you very, very much, David.
No, just behind your back, Peter.
No, there's nothing.
I'm just kidding.
I'm completely upfront. No,
except
that is true.
But I have said, and I think I've said on this podcast, in my days of walking the earth, and I'm in my 5th decade here, I think I've probably met something like 25,000 people. I don't know. Like, let's just guess. I don't know. Certainly more than 8,000, like thousands of people. There are probably 35 of them I would let eat at dinner at my house.
Am I one of those?
Yeah. I haven't met your wife yet, though. She can't come until I meet her. But you're welcome anytime.
I'm, as you said that, I'm monitoring your micro expressions, and what you said was congruent with your micro expressions, so I'll believe you.
That's right. Yeah, you can, and you can bring up. I even trust you to bring a +1.
Oh man, that's a lot.
Yeah,
that's a lot coming from you. Yeah, I think it's there are certain people who are literally critical. They're negative about everyone but their partner, right? And sometimes I wonder, like, are they negative about their partner, but they just don't express it? Or will they become negative about you, But some people, I talked to one of my buddies, Hambrick, and they thought you're sort of the cynical side of you is kind of endearing.
It is.
It is actually. It actually is. I think he's I think he sometimes gets, people don't really understand where it comes from, but like, and Hambrick has said this before, that he's got this, he actually thinks he's more empathetic than most. I don't know if that's true, but it's maybe different empathy. I think he actually really cares about, he wants things to be better, and he cares about humanity as a whole. And so there's this thing that it comes across as sort of condescending, but that I think ultimately, I think he wants joy for people. And I think he's one of those guys that thinks very logically, and he sees, like, he's very good pattern recognition, and he just wants to shake people sometimes and be like, wake the fuck up and see what you're doing. Like, this is so, like, it's, to him, it's just so clear. And I think that's the way, is that fair, Scott? The way
I think so. And that's why I'm going to be so good at helping these people break up.
Here's how I would put it, Scott. I think you are very honest. Like, so what comes out of your mouth is actually how you feel and think. And I think that's rare in people who are like public personas, you know,
right,
who can be so congruent with their inner experience. And so I think it's people experience it as like, this is a real person. This is a person that I can understand, that I can relate to.
Well, thank you. That's good. I'll take that. Yeah, I'm incapable of lying. I might be wrong, but I didn't lie. You know?
Yeah.
And
I think you're willing to process things out loud and change your mind.
Yeah, we think out loud on here all the time. It's something most people won't do. They won't think. Well, they won't think in private, let alone in public.
Which comes to the next one, actually, the 17.
Does this person receive feedback, examine their shortcomings, and honestly make moves towards correcting things they can correct? Now, we need to reword this one, David, because you've worded this one like a good sign. If it was a bad sign, you would say, this person does not receive feedback, can't,
So if you said no to that, then that would be the red flag.
Yeah, right.
So like, this is probably one of the most important ones in my mind. Like, if someone is incapable of growth, incapable of receiving feedback, like, where are you
going to go?
What's going to happen? More of the same.
Yeah, maybe
so you better like the way it is.
This one might ought to be number one, you know? Because if you don't have this, what are you going to do? There's no conversation. There's no improvement. There's no nothing. This, if the answer to this one is no, everything's brick walls. I've always been interested in Charity Michelle. I've probably always loved her, like instantly. We're compatible. We have so much shared history and so much shared experience, and all those things have been so helpful. But I think that we're both willing to do the things in 17, and that may be the difference between the joyless, dead marriages that we see and what we have, which I think is rare. I'm not privy to everyone's marriages, of course, but I don't think anybody's got one as good as we do.
I would say, like, the challenge here for anyone listening is the next time they receive feedback, can they hear it as information? Can they be thankful for the feedback?
Right.
Can they thank the person for giving them the feedback? And can they take it and examine it? You know, if you feel like it's really not true, it's the only one person that you've ever received this unique feedback from, bounce it off some friends. Like, hey, this is something I heard. What do you think? Is there any truth in this?
I always try to consider the source of the feedback. And so here, the source of the feedback we're concerned about is your loved one, your romantic partner here, right? And so they need to trust the feedback from the romantic partner, which is not what I trust. I do not trust the feedback from people who comment on YouTube, David. So that brings us...
They may not have any context, right? And it's obvious to me when someone is commenting negatively on something that I've said, and they have no context or they have no sort of thought process in it,
Can I read Greg's comment on our last show that we did together? No, this is going to be goodwill. Because David and I engaged with Greg a little bit. Can I read it, David?
Sure.
Greg says, number one red flag is not what you guys said it is. It is, am I the right person for them? And then he says some stuff that's not germane, really. And I commented back to him and said, I'll leave that decision to the other person. I trust them to judge my fitness as a mate. And then Greg said, the only person that can truly know that is yourself. Mr. Hambrick, you can be a deceiver, for the other would know a facade. Okay, hire a detective. It's up to them. I can't make that decision for them. And then I said we should make deception illegal. And then Peter, being all magnanimous like he is, he says, Greg, interesting thought. I'm going to try to do this in my David voice. Hang on.
Good.
No, I can't even do it.
He gave Greg some empathy.
Well, I have to add this into our discussion. My initial reaction is that I agree if you know you are wrong for them, that might be less of a red flag and more of a gut feeling to walk away. But on the other hand, I know a ton of anxious, insecure guys who think they are wrong for everyone. What do you think of that, though? His original comment, Uncle David?
Yeah, I think it's almost impossible to understand the complete context of what he's saying, because I don't know him. I don't know his story. I don't know his upbringing.
Sure you do. He just posted a comment on YouTube. We know everything we need to know based on the fact. Was it YouTube? It was a YouTube comment?
Yeah, it was a YouTube comment. Yeah,
No,
David actually screen capped this and sent it to me.
You know everything you need to know. If you leave a comment on YouTube, you need to hire a psychiatrist because you have mental problems. Like no one who is okay would ever leave a comment on YouTube ever about anything ever, period. Move on to the next point. It's crazy. This is an adult. And look, Greg might be 13. He could be 13. And if he's 13, I'll give him a pass. But you mean an adult, a fucking adult, left a comment on a YouTube video? No, not okay.
Wait, I love how he ended it. He said, good subject, my squat just improved 20 pounds.
Right.
So, this guy obviously has given you guys some attention. Yeah. He's listening to what you're saying. He's improving his squat. And so I don't know. Like, I have no animosity or anger towards this guy. Like,
I only do because he left comments on YouTube.
I don't either. But I think that, and I've heard people say this, well, are you right for them? And I would like to flip that and say that if you're not right for them, it's going to be patently obvious to someone who's awake and has the tools that they aren't right for you either. So you can still focus on their fitness as a mate for you, because it's going to be mutual. And if they aren't a fit for you, you aren't going to be a fit for them, and vice versa. It's actually the same thing. So you can pay attention to yourself, you can pay attention to them, and you can judge them as fit for fitness. If you're not right for them, you will be able to detect the fact that they're not going to be able to reciprocate in the relationship, that they're going to be unavailable in some way, et cetera, et cetera. And that's data that's coming into your eyes, ears, nose, mouth, and skin that you can use to learn to walk away. And then you can contact me, and I will let her know, hey Sheila, Greg reached out. He's let me know that it's been wonderful. He thanks you so much for all those Mexican dinners and all the Netflix, but it's no longer going to work out. Best of luck to you. If you need help with a future breakup, let me know.
I just don't think that people really break up with other people because they feel like I'm wrong for them.
That's the wrong reason. It's for the other person.
I think that's an excuse.
Yeah.
I think it's an excuse people say. Like some of the least favorite things that I have is like, oh, it's not you, it's me.
It's my favorite.
It's like
my favorite.
There's a lot of dishonest things that people say when they're breaking up so that they don't hurt the other person's feelings.
My favorite scene in any Seinfeld is when George's girlfriend was just like, it's not you, it's me. He's like, hold on. It's not you, he's like, I invented it's not you, it's me.
Right.
If it's anybody, it's me. And she's like, all right, it's you. He's like, you're goddamn right, it's me.
Own it.
It's me.
Own it. Yeah. This sort of false. This is where I'm going to go at him. This sort of false altruism, where you're worried about the other person, means you're probably not ready for a relationship. Like you've got, Ayn Rand. I want to make everybody mad right now. Ayn Rand says before you can say I love you, you first have to say I. And this guy isn't at I yet, I would suspect, from the 11 words he wrote. There's my analysis. All right. Number
Let's keep
18, does this person remain steadfast with commitments, agreements, and responsibilities?
Yeah, I think I put this in here because I think history repeats itself. So if they've had issues with committing to something, bearing responsibility, carrying weight in whatever capacity, the weight of their life they've had to carry, it says something about them. On the other hand, if this person, like if this is like a single mother and she's been struggling to be a good mom, and she's got a 3 or 4 year old, and she's like, she's committed to that. That's like a really good sign. So someone can be in a tough situation and really be showing their character in the midst of it.
Yeah, there's a growing up portion to this too, right? So I think most of us have a time in our life when we're young and immature, frontal lobe's not developed, whatever it is, and at some point you mature enough to be ready to make long-term commitments when you weren't at 17, right? Like at 17, 8, or whatever it is. Hambrick was probably ready at 12.
I was 15 minutes early and ready.
Yeah, right. And so it's, but you know what I'm saying? Like there's a maturity growth process here where, so if you're listening to this and you're 19 years old, then that's different than if you're 33 and you're like, I've had a hard time keeping my promises, making commitments, carrying things through in my mid 30s versus, if you're 19, 20 years old.
And to that point, we come to Puder's Law, number 19. Does this person have a history of working at many jobs and have issues with authority figures?
Yeah, it's just a pattern I've seen. There's certain people who like literally have worked 10 to 20 jobs, like really struggled. Every single authority figure over them has always been evil.
Oh, he's got it out for me, man. The boss, he had it out for me. It's like, dude, you were washing dishes. He didn't know you.
Yeah. Yeah. So sometimes, like when I have a patient who's dating someone, I'll be like, "Oh, what's their job? How long they've been working there? I'm trying to assess like what type of, from the things that we can know about this person, what can we know?" The people who move from job to job and have issues with authority, they always have a reason. They always have an excuse. And how are they going to do with authority when like you have something that you want, or like you are trying to have a budget, and so you're trying to set up some boundaries and authority, and so how are they then going to react to you in the midst of that? So I think in all relationships we have places of authority. So like my wife, will tell me to do things and I will tell her to do things, and we both respect each other's desires in that, and we say it nicely, and we always say it in a way like, "Can you please?" or "Can you take out the garbage?" And so if you're dating someone who always has issues with authority, at some point it's going to come back to you.
Yeah,
that's a good connection. I knew people have to be thinking about like, what's the connection between work, this like issues with authority and jobs versus in an actual relationship. And so
I think
you connected it well there. Like they're obviously, if you can't respect each other in a way where you can actually hear, like you can ask your significant other to do something, or even at times tell them, right? Like in a nice way, but like there's times when you need to like, "Hey babe, I need you to go pick up the kids from practice." If you're like, "Go fuck yourself, you go pick up the kids," like that's a problem, right? And a red flag would be if they every 3 months are changing jobs because it's always the boss's fault. I can see why that'd be a red flag.
Yeah, 18 and 19 are closely related, and I'll read those. And we've already gone through 20, 21, and 22. But 18 and 19 are, does this person remain steadfast with commitments, agreements, and responsibilities? And 19 is, does this person have a history of working at many jobs and have issues with authority figures? So this ability to take on a commitment and persevere in it, and this bristling against authority stuff can make the simplest of marital tasks miserable. Because we have, I think all marriages have, well, I'll call it a locus of authority for each of the partners. Like you might be in charge of the budget, and the other one might be in charge of interacting with the kids' school. I don't know, whatever. And in those spheres, the respective partners are the authority in that sphere. and you've got to let them be the authority in that sphere. We don't have enough life to be in charge of all of it. That's why we get a mate. That's one of the reasons we get a mate.
Yeah.
So it's good when you can let the other be in charge. Ugh. Do we have time to go to the good signs, or should we just hang?
What about this last one? I don't think we.
We didn't get it.
We talked about this last one. Am I just with this person because I don't want to be alone?
Ooh.
I cannot. I have seen that, but I cannot imagine that. I cannot imagine that. Like, this person's bad, but just being with me is worse. I mean, we're back to the Ayn Rand quote, right? The I thing.
It's like I tell my friends who are single and depressed, and they think that they're going to be all their issues are going to be solved in a relationship, and I tell them, like, look, actually, like, relationships don't make you much more happy.
Sure.
Like, in the big scope of statistics, like, overall, it's about the same before and after. So if you're depressed before, you're probably going to be depressed after. There may be that honeymoon period where you feel some increased dopamine and oxytocin. And
so let's drill down on this. So you say that some of the studies show that the marriage doesn't actually make the person happier. We still have our semantic argument from earlier about joy, eudaimonia, happiness, whatever. But why then do people get married? Why should they get married? If it doesn't make people happier, it certainly adds complexity to our lives, right?
For some people, it does make them happier, and for some people, it makes them less happy. And if there's a really nice a book on the Harvard longitudinal study, which followed these Harvard grads and inner city people for about 70 years into their 90s, and they found that some people had an unhappy first marriage, and even an unhappy second marriage, but found a very happy third marriage. And that was an interesting chapter for me because it gave me hope for my patients and for people who are in very unhappy situations. And it kind of, I think people can find relationships and can find meaning later in life, even if they haven't found it in earlier relationships. But I would say in general, I don't think we should look at relationships to give us a sense of meaning and purpose and give us joy or happiness.
Right.
Yeah. Hey, can I say, I want to give a personal disclaimer that I think you two would agree with as well, but I don't want to put my words in your mouth. So as we talk through this sort of relationship red flags, we're really talking about dating type relationships, right? For me, anybody can look at their significant other and find red flags in their significant other. But I'm of the opinion, and I don't think all of our listeners have to agree with this, that if you're married to that person, then we do what we can to make it work, right? Like, my marriage has been full of red flags before. I certainly have had many more red flags attributed to me and my responsibility than my wife. Like, I'm full of red flags. But I'm thankful that in a marriage, in an actual marriage relationship that has red flags, that we've chosen that we're not going anywhere. We're going to work through this. We've done a lot of therapy. We've done couples therapy. We've done individual therapy. So, this conversation started as finding someone who could potentially be a mate. I would I would feel incredibly guilty if listeners heard this and decided to divorce their husband or wife because, you've got 5 red flags out of the 20 that these guys talked about. That's not what we're talking about.
What's
right?
the over under, David? If you're married and there's 7 of 22, are they out?
I totally agree with Matt Reynolds.
Yeah,
and I counsel my patients to start with themselves always. Because it's always easier to look and point the other finger when you're in the relationship. Like, this is the other person's problem 100%. But do your own work, right? If you feel like you're in a dysfunctional relationship, have you forgiven your partner for everything you can possibly forgive them for? I have this one patient who went through a lot of treatment, found out she's bitter and resentful towards her husband for things that were said 10 years ago, 20 years ago. And I said to her, look, like, I think you have to forgive. You have to forgive. You don't want to leave the relationship. so your choice is either to just live in apathy and anger and resentment and bitterness, or to forgive and to move into another place. And I think forgiveness is possible, even for really bad things.
Yeah. I have a friend that says that resentment, holding resentment, is like drinking poison and wanting the other person to die.
Right, 100%. I mean, it's miserable. So I would say do your work, and if your partner is someone who's been struggling and has, stuff that they need to work through, are they willing to seek treatment? I would start with there. Either, and sometimes it can be really hard to get someone in to get help.
Just go get help yourself. When they see, it'll give you different coping skills, different ways to approach the problems in your marriage and your relationships. And when you change, the dynamic will change, and maybe that log jam will loosen up. And, I agree with you, Matt. I have seen so many times that people are in these marriages and that they fall apart and things, whatever happens. They get a divorce, or maybe they persist in the thing. And one of them thinks it's all the other's fault, but the truth of it is like the things are co-created, and everybody has a role. Everybody has a role. And it might just be that your picker's broken, or it might be that you play some role, like active role, day by day in the problems in the marriage. But either way, you getting out of this one ain't going to fix that. It's not going to improve your likelihood for the next trip, I don't think.
That's right.
David, there's your 22 red flags. See, now we have to do a green flags show. But I wanted to tell a story about one of my friends with Dr. Puder on here. One of my friends who comes and trains here in person. He's 54 years old. He's had multiple joint replacements, and he's pretty brittle. And he squats and he's not a very tall guy. He's a smaller stature gentleman. He probably weighs 170 pounds, 5'5", something like that. And he's squatting around 300 for a set of 5 for a PR. And he's 54. He's getting skin tears on his back. And I said, "Hey, friend, hey, listen to the show. We talk a little bit about testosterone replacement. I've known some other guys that have had some skin tear troubles and troubles healing. They go get their tee up, and that stuff clears up. And you're certainly in the demographic. Go have it looked at." And he goes and has it looked at. Low in the basement, as you would expect, or as I expected. And he says, "Man, I don't know if I want to get on testosterone replacement therapy, because once I get on it, I'll always have to be on it, and I'll never make any testosterone." I've had so many guys tell me that.
Right.
I know you're listening, friend. You're driving me nuts. You're not making any now. But what do you say to people about that?
Yeah, so I think why not get into the 75th percentile of average men your age? Why not get to that? Why not get to that point? That's not roiding in the sense of like, the classic weightlifters who would go up, 10 times what the average person has testosterone wise, and then would need to cycle off and cycle down.
Let's not go through puberty again, but 75th percentile, I like that.
I think our body produces testosterone. If some people are at the 75th percentile already, that would be saying like, if you're in the let's say you're in the 5th percentile for men, okay? And you're like way down there, your testosterone is like 100 or something like that. That would be saying to someone who's naturally in the 75th percentile, I think you should lower your testosterone, because if you're in the 75th percentile, you're going to become resistant to your testosterone. Do you see how that doesn't make sense? So I don't think that physiologically it works like that. I think if you're going into the 75th percentile, and what I mean, there's like a bell curve where men are at, right? Average is at 50. So why not just get around to the 75th percentile, especially if you're lifting, especially if you want, increased energy, increased vitality. It's not going to hurt you long term. I think a lot of the studies that were concerning, like a prostate and stuff like that, they've been
discredited at this point.
If you look at the large meta-analysis data, And I would go to a urologist to have that discussion, because usually the urology's on that research. It's not a huge deal. Now, if you had prostate cancer, then yeah, you probably can't go on testosterone.
There are certainly contraindications.
There are contraindications. So you should actually talk to a doctor, a urologist, and look at your medical issues and decide if it's a good fit for you. Don't just go to someone who's pushing testosterone and doesn't really do a full evaluation on you. But that would be my short answer.
Yeah, it's good. It just seems that there's still this kind of cultural thing about PEDs that seems to cast sort of a dark cloud. Like, you wouldn't go like, oh, my pancreas isn't making insulin, and so I'm not going to go on insulin, because if I go on insulin, my pancreas will never make insulin again. You'd be like, wait a minute. Like,
you're not making any now anyway.
So, but I think things are changing. Things have changed a lot over the last decade. So
this guy actually did go to a urologist, I believe. And Matt, this is astounding. I've never heard of this before.
Uh-huh.
So he went, he got tested. He was low. He was under 200, I think. I can't remember exactly what it was. It was low. And it has the skin tear stuff. Doctor prescribed tea and Anavar.
Oh, really? Interesting. Yeah. I think typically I've only heard of Anavar being prescribed for cancer or AIDS patients.
Wasting disease.
Yeah.
Wasting disease and stuff. But this physician is not a quack, not one of those guys, and but he's having trouble healing. He's having ulcers on his back from the barbell and having trouble. So
interesting.
Yeah, interesting stuff. This is another Barbell Logic podcast. Uncle David just fled the scene. I think he had to go void his bladder.
I bet he's fixing a relationship.
Oh, okay. Sometimes that'll fix a relationship.
That's true.
We'll get another show on the books here pretty soon, and we'll go over the green lights that help us know that maybe we're looking at someone that might be a good fit for us in the future. Thank you so much for coming on again, Uncle David. It's always so much fun, man.
Yeah, bro. I really enjoyed it. And I also want to go through with you guys my sort of ideas on overcoming fear as in sports psychology as well. And so we'll get to that hopefully in the future as well. That'll be a lot of fun.
Such a tease David Puder is.
Perfect.
Oh, man.
Such a tease.
There's a polyvagal theory. I did an episode on the polyvagal theory, and it really, I think, helps explain some of these aspects of when we go into that deep fear response. And so I want to do a deep dive with you guys into that. I haven't done that publicly about how it relates to sports psychology, but it's in my brain, so we'll get that out.
You haven't gone public with your polyvagal theory.
Polyvagal.
Oh.
I was going to say, I love vagals. I'm a huge fan.
Well, thank you guys so much for listening. If you're one of the people that says, gosh, I came here for barbells, these guys aren't qualified to talk about relationships, I'm sorry. But you can
actually,
send your questions.
No, hold on. In fact, you're right. We're not qualified, except for Dr. Puder is, which is why he's on the show.
Listen, how's Puder qualified? I mean, really, I'm not going to say that I am, but how does one become qualified?
Yeah, I understand.
You think about the stuff, you study the stuff, you work in the stuff, and then you know the stuff. If you want to be a polar bear expert, you observe polar bears. You live amongst the polar bears. You make a study of polar bears, and by you are a polar bear expert.
Yeah.
So credentialism is so strange, but it's rampant.
No, I would totally agree with you. Don't believe someone just because of their credentials. Independently consider if it reflects the reality that you live in and if it makes sense to you. And then also, question and read. I don't think you have to be a marriage and family therapist to be an expert on marriage and family.
I've seen some grandmas that were,
Yeah. My grandma and Grandpa Lynn.
Yep.
That we had on the podcast. That guy was a marriage expert.
So hopefully this is food for thought. Hopefully this will fuel your interest and cause you to go do some more research and read up and find someone that you think is expert enough to maybe help you. I think Dr. David Puder is expert enough to help us. So thanks for coming and doing this. And send your questions, guys, to questions@barbell-logic.com, and we'll get to those on a future show. And then go follow Puder. He's on Twitter. He's at David Puder. On Instagram, he's at Dr. David Puder, I think. on Instagram. And of course, you can go listen to his show, which is excellent. And it's also produced by producer Trent. It's the Psychiatry and Psychotherapy podcast. Anything else we need to plug? You got some supplements coming out, bro? How about a clothing line? Yeah. Subs?
Well, I think I'm good. But
You should do like blue contacts. You do like pewter contacts, and then you could have eyes just like pewter.
Pewter blue. That's a new
Pewter
color.
blue.
We're gonna put
I
that
like
in
that.
we're gonna put that in the fall line.
Yeah.
Our pewter blue.
See if we can get that in the big box of Crayolas. Pewter
my wife started a podcast on dating, actually, from a Christian perspective. Maybe you should have her on for because she does some dating coaching and stuff like that. So
maybe she can
we'll have to connect you guys.
Maybe Matt and I can role play, and then she could act as the intermediary.
So you get your improv in, so that you've been wanting me to do for a long time.
Right.
We could improv role play relationships. That's right. And
Why don't I come on and just do relationship therapy for you too?
Okay.
Hey, listen, if I don't have to pay for that one, I'm in.
Oh man.
Thanks, dude. Thanks for doing the show.
Thank you,
All
guys.
right, thanks for listening. We'll see you guys next week.
Bye. Yeah, you're digmatized.